This is my current NixOS setup. But how did I get here? This is my 1 year journey with Linux as my main daily driver. When I was in college, I had this cheap Dell Inspiron 5570 with Intel i5 8th generation and 8 gigs of RAM with 2 gigs of AMD GPU. This was a decent laptop for most purposes and most of the college work, but it wasn't for me. I did a lot of CAD modeling using SolidWorks and I needed something powerful. And after 3 years of using the laptop, the GPU just died. I couldn't boot into Windows. I couldn't do anything. Even if I reinstalled Windows on this laptop, it would just boot into the blue screen. It kept happening again and again and again. At this point, I started researching about different distributions of Linux and I came across Zorin OS. Zorin OS at the time presented itself as the Linux alternative to Windows. It was targeted towards Windows switches to Linux. I just installed Zorin OS on that Dell laptop and it just worked. Now, one thing I forgot to do before installing any kind of Linux was disabling the secure boot. My secure boot was on, and when I tried installing Pop OS, it just bugged out. When I installed Pop OS and then rebooted, the laptop just wouldn't start. It would just flicker on the boot screen and I could not press any buttons, and that was it for the laptop. I did buy an Acer Predator Helios Neo 16 before dumping the laptop, and this was a beast for gaming. I actually played a lot of Cyberpunk 2077 on this laptop, but Windows being Windows, it used a lot of resources for Windows itself, and I could not get past medium settings on Windows 11 for Cyberpunk. I mostly played on low settings to get that maximum frame rate, but it wasn't the best experience for Cyberpunk. After 1 year, Windows started acting out. It just wouldn't let me update my graphics driver, update the BIOS. There was game crashes, even simple games would crash. My CPU temperatures would go about 100 degrees Celsius. It was at this time I said, let's just go for Linux, and I started with Zorin OS again on my new laptop. But this time, I read through forums, I read through the wiki, I actually read through the installation process. I saw some YouTube videos about installation for Linux, and then I disabled the secure boot this time. One thing you have to remember here is I had two drives. One was for the OS and one was for gaming. So all my games were on one drive and my OS was on one drive. When I tried gaming, the performance wasn't that different from Windows at first, and I tried different distros like Pop OS and then Bazite and then Nobara, but the gaming performance stayed the same. When I got into Linux a bit more, I just figured out that it was an NTFS file system issue, and Linux did not play well with the NTFS file system at that time. Now, what I did was I formatted my entire drive to BTRFS file system and I reinstalled all my games, and the performance improved. Not significantly, but there was a bit improvement over Windows and the previous NTFS drive performance. After this, when I was going through YouTube, I found out about this distro called CachyOS, which was supposed to be a gaming distro built on Arch. I immediately installed CachyOS, got to the setup. I just used the default settings with BTRFS, Lamine, and got snapshots working, and then got my gaming setup. And I tried Cyberpunk again. Now, this was the first time I could go to high settings on Cyberpunk 2077. In some areas of the night city in Cyberpunk 2077, I could even turn on ray tracing and it would just look amazing. As CachyOS was based on Arch, there were some issues I had to go through. In the 1 year I was in Linux, I already saw two AUR attacks, that is the Arch user repository attacks, and I became a bit paranoid about Arch. Then I switched to Fedora for a while, then I kept jumping between CachyOS and Fedora and Nobara, and then I got to know about Hyprland, right? It's a tiling window manager. I started with Jaculets.files, then ML4Ws.files, and then I kept switching. Then I came across Dank Material Shell, which is a quick shell based ecosystem for Hyprland, and it was really good. But again, Fedora and CachyOS weren't performing as good I was expecting it to, especially for Hyperland. When I switched workspaces or windows, there was a bit of lag when switching windows I could see the frame rates drop, or it wasn't the best of the experiences. Now at this time I tried changing distros, tried changing shells to Noctala, Celestia, but it did not really matter because the stuttering persisted. I played with the environment variables and all that stuff, and nothing worked for me. I saw a few videos about NixOS, which was a declarative Linux system, and I wanted to give it a shot. I tried NixOS on virtual machine a few times, but being from a non-programming background, I had no idea how NixOS worked or what the code really said. It took me a while to get used to the Nix language, and I got Hyprland and Noctala V5 working on my virtual machine with NixOS, and then I decided it was time to switch to NixOS on my laptop, the actual hardware itself, because I could not test my NVIDIA graphics drivers or Steam on virtual machines. Now, when I started with configuring NixOS on my actual hardware, there were a few hiccups. So I could not start with the minimal install because there was no graphical interface, and I did not really like using Nano for editing my configurations. So I decided to switch to the GNOME desktop. It was just two lines of code, one for the GNOME desktop and one for the GTM display manager. And I logged into the GNOME desktop, used the GNOME text editor for editing, and built my HyperLM setup from the ground up with Noctala V5. I even had Noctala Greeter installed through Flakes, and now it just works flawlessly. It has been the longest time I have used any distro, so I'm actually getting work done now after a year. Gaming isn't a problem on Linux distros because I have a separate game drive which stores all my games on a drive. I just have to log into Steam on my main drive and then link the or mount the secondary game drive to Steam OS, and I could just play games. That wasn't really an issue. The only issue with NixOS as a starter was keeping a track of my configurations. And thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe if you like this video. If you want more videos, just comment down below on what videos you want, what you want to know about my Linux journey, and what distros you're on right now, or what distros you want me to try on a virtual machine. And well, thank you for watching.